First of all, I just want to thank everyone who has stayed with us throughout the day, who's just now joining us. We're just so grateful that you all have taken the time to be a part of this conference experience. We've had a pretty dynamic day today. We started the day with a dialogue with some community members. We heard from some amazing scholars and researchers from all around the world. And now we're going to wind down our time together with two amazing artists who I have the honor of introducing in a second. I want to thank Michael and Kay beforehand for your patience as we've navigated planning for this, and also for just being here in this space. You know, this is an academic conference, so we really wanted to infuse some celebration and some joy and just some moments of just being together that were maybe not traditional to these type conferences. And we just are so grateful you all accepted request to be here. So thank you so much. I will be moderating. So what that means is I'm going to introduce Kay and Michael. They're each going to perform a set, and then we will have some time at the end for a Q&A. We're a small group this afternoon, but that's okay because I like being intimate sometimes. And this is one of those moments where I think that could be really beneficial. So if you do have questions for Kay and Michael throughout today's session, please drop those in the Q&A chat function there for me. And I will do my best to, facilitate the Q&A at the end of the session. This is scheduled to go until 5:30, but we're going to kind of just see what happens, go with the flow. You know, we're not tied to that time. Time is a social construct. So we're just going to do what feels good for Michael and Kay and for the group. Does that sound good? Great. Michael and Kay, are you both ready for me to start? Awesome. So
ready whenever you are.
Perfect. Love it. And I just love seeing you two side by side. You're side by side on my screen, and it's great. I'm just very excited. So let's start off today. I'm going to introduce Kay. Kay Barrett, aka Brown Round Boy at Brown Round Boy. Check that out, that hashtag. Is a poet, essayist, and cultural strategist. Their second book, More Than Organs, by Sibling Rivalry Press 2020, received the 2021 Stonewall Honor Book Award by the American Library Association, and is a 2021 Lambda Literary Award finalist. They have received fellowships from MacDowell as a 2020 James Baldwin Fellow, the Homeschool, Drunken Boat, Vana Voices, Monson Arts, and the Lambda Literary Review. Barrett is a 3-time Pushcart Prize nominee and a 2-time Best of the Net nominee. They have featured They have been featured at the United Nations, the Lincoln Center, Symphony Space, Brooklyn Museum, Princeton, and more. Wow. Their contributions are found in the New York Times, Bitch Media, Color Lines, Asian American Literary Review, and Al Jazeera, Nylon, Vogue, The Rumpus, and the Frontier Poetry. Currently, they remix their mama's recipes and live in Jersey City with their jolly dog. I've had the honor of hearing Kay perform before, and I think we're all in for a treat. So thank you so much again, Kay, for being here. Next person I have the honor of introducing is Michael Oliviaro. Am I saying that right, Michael? Your last name?
Oliveros.
Oliveros. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is currently an undergraduate student majoring in gender and women's studies, minoring in global Asian studies, actually at UIC, following a pre-medical track. They Singular is their debut work, and they are truly excited to share this chapter of their story with all of us. Currently, they attend UIC, live in Chicago suburbs with their sister, parents, and their family, Axolotl. All right, great. I will turn it over to you both. And as folks, feel free to drop questions, and I'll be back after your sets.
Wow. Thank you, JT, and thank you, everyone, for having me. Before I get further into who I am and they singular and what that is and what that means, I need to tell all of you something very, very important about me. Something that is so salient to my identity that it passes all titles and all labels and all names. I want you to know that as a kid, I was never able to sit still. Throughout all of elementary and high school, I was known for being the troublemaker, the loudmouth, the kid that had their legs up, leaning back in one of those plastic desks. And soon that evolved into me, sitting on top of the desk as if I was the king of the hill, or leaning back, or sitting with my knees tucked all the way to my chin, futilely trying to make a nest out of this hard, synthetic, beige monstrosity of furniture. And I say that because when I think about what it means to look beyond the binary, I'm transported to that desk that I was in high school. My mind goes automatically to little closeted me attending this very private, conservative religious high school. Senior year, sitting in front of their English class, half curled up in their chair like I'm trying to become the plastic itself, and half coiled, ready to spring. There's not a single relaxed muscle in my body. Every fiber of me is raw and electrified when my English teacher says that I can't write a paper on how they should be popularized as a singular pronoun because that would be immoral and unethical, as if existing in and of itself was immoral. And there I was, with square glasses and this pixie cut that was still a little bit too long for my liking, torn between wanting to shrivel up into the rigid bones of this chair, or to let my rage fill the entire room. This is the premise of Day Singular. Now, it wouldn't be until January of 2020, when my friend, later editor, came out to me as non-binary, that the first draft of Day Singular would be completed. They grew up in the same school that I did, and they told me that they felt alone in their gender queerness and were struggling with reconciling how religion and identity all intertwine. And so, me being me, too full of words and half a country away, I did the most natural thing that anyone would do in that position. I sent them the manuscript of what would later be my first book, which is like the obvious answer, right? But that's just a little bit about me. I can tack on some other things, such as my name is Michael Oliveros. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and siya if you're also Filipino or speak Tagalog. I am also hear the terms Filipinx or Philippine being tossed around. And as JT stated, I am an undergraduate student at UIC, a gender women's studies major with a global Asian studies minor. And within the past 6 months, I've also been recently coming to terms with my disabled identity and what it means to navigate this world as a disabled person. But Day Singular here is my debut book. I illustrated and self-published and found beta readers and conducted press for this little baby of mine within a very hectic 6-month period of my life. And so, if you'll have me, I would more than love to share a couple of poems with you from this book, because even though this book has been out for more than a year, and even though I would say that I'm such a different person from when this book was first published, I still think of it as a love letter to the kids squirming in that chair. So, without further ado, here are some poems from Day Singular. The first one is titled Diaspora. Being a genderqueer Filipinx person is to experience diaspora multidimensionally. My sun-born blood, longing to return home to a country that doesn't recognize me. My genderqueer soul, seeking to reconcile with the very bones and skins and parts that reject it. Diaspora. This next little piece is called My Genderhood Occurred in the Dark. I just want to be free of the confines of manhood and womanhood. Live in a world where I can choose to express either or none or some or all. God, wouldn't that be something? To live unapologetically, to just be. It is unfortunate that both the woman and the man within me were never allowed to exist outside of me, in tandem with each other, that I was so afraid of being boy and girl and neither and all, that I locked all these pieces deep enough to almost forget about them, depriving every lonesome part of me of sunshine. My genderhood occurred in the dark. This one's called I'm Still Discovering What It Means to Be Me, and that's okay. I still don't understand your gender, someone interjects, stumbles, falls, fails, well-meaning but misunderstanding. But what is the universe? I want to reply. What is God? What about gender is so unfathomable that it cannot be sorted with the rest of all these unfathomable things? My gender is more than feeling, surpasses belief, spans the leap somewhere between faith and science that hasn't been explored yet, waiting to be discovered but not conquered, dares to look every god in the eye, but could only be experienced as religion, as worship of my body and my autonomy, celebration of who I am free to become. My gender is something I don't have words for yet. There's no clear-cut dictionary definition for where I exist because I am the first of me to exist. So I swallow my tongue and define my gender by what it is not. This one's one of my favorites. It is, and those quiet feats are just as important and victorious. One day I will have the confidence and the courage to look at my genderqueer self and say, I love you. Watch me get away with performing the most absurd miracle, loving myself so hard and so fiercely that it becomes everything I am. For now, though, all I have the strength to do is glimpse at the body in the mirror and think quietly, a silent thank you. And those quiet feats are just as important and victorious. This one's a letter to my sister. My dearest sister, this is my apology for letting you believe that I was your sister all these years. This is my apology for never saying what I believe, for never teaching you what I know to be true in the world. Know that I was afraid and that I am afraid. And the truth is that I am too sick of all of this heteronormative, cis-normative, sexist bullshit. So here's what I wish I taught you. My pronouns are exclusively they, them, theirs. Love transcends all things. You can be both kind and fierce. Consent is empowering, and don't let anyone say yes or no for you. Embrace that beautiful brown body of yours and the golden soul that comes with it. Be a waymaker, and whether or not you agree with someone, respect their beliefs and identities. And forgive, sweetheart. Forgive others, forgive yourself. And when you learn all that and more, that's when every breath is exhaled with grace. To my sister. These next two pieces are less of poems and more of big blocks of stream of consciousness writing. So I'm just going to read them together as opposed to having little titles that separate them. This is what I look like when I am healing. It is not pretty or aesthetic but just as revolutionary. I am healing. I am raw and undone, learning everything I have ever known in exchange for some version of life where I love me back. This is not a graceful process. It is undoing. It is apologizing to the ghost of my old self before killing it. My healing is messy, private, unintelligible to most, but bringer of much needed clarity. I am unrefined and ready to be molded into the better version of myself. I am trying. I am open. I am here. I learned how to love the soft parts of me, praised the parts of me that were still stubbornly raw after years of attempting to make them callous. Carefully dressed my wounds in pink and blue bandages, unraveled my chest to let myself breathe, let myself hold someone else's hand. When I first spoke my name, there was no thunder, no rain, no inferno. There was only a whisper, the quietest beckoning, gesturing me to come into existence. I walked away from my own guilt, and after years of starving myself of love, I ate until I was overflowing with it. Choosing to be kind to myself was the most powerful decision that I have ever made. This poem is titled, "To Love the Hollowed Spaces is to Love the Universe Within Them." My gender is as spacious as a honeycomb, constructed with walls of boy and girl and otherness, cradling the empty spaces. The absence of definable gender does not mean the absence of love or understanding. It means to find a home within each niche. To love the hollowed spaces is to love the universe within them. This one's the title poem of the book, They Singular. I exist as more than a miracle, more than some phenomenal political hero or recent scientific discovery. I am not debatable or justifiable. I am just as raw and refined and redeemable as every other person. I am human, an individual, someone who longs for a connection. They singular. Now this last piece is the longest piece in my set, and is also the longest piece in the book. And this piece more speaks on what it means to be Filipino and a child of the diaspora. But when I think of beyond the binary, I also just can't look through this lens of only looking at myself through gender queerness, right? Because I don't exist in one dimension. The binary to me also is about what it means to be stretched and pulled and to feel this tension between living between motherland and diaspora, of being home and away from home. So, without further ado, this is Never Swim Alone. I remember the days when the sun still loved me, as if she had birthed me, swaddled my brown skin until her touch turned me golden, raced me to the horizon barefooted and bronzed until the night bled into the sky. When I was younger, and summer was made of all play and no work, I would spend those humid days smelling like chlorine and sweat and sugar that dripped down my right elbow, a river of milk running from my pinky, from a reservoir of melting ice cream that Papa got for me when I was able to pause my splashing around and rise from the water. Mama always told me never swim alone. The park district's pools, artificial scent, and glistening tiles were not enough to trick her into believing that the water didn't have an agenda. But near the water I am most at home, ditching my chinelas to slide into the pool. It is not the sea, but even so, the water brings me back, carries me to Malabon, where the city lays bankrupt to the sea, and my lolos and lolas are all crammed into a sinking house that once sat at the top of the street, but now continues to plunge 6 feet deeper every time water steals soil from the shore. When we visited Mamasel in Parañaque, I would dash to the statue of Mother Mary when no one else was looking, and attempt to scale this shrine, grasping with my grubby hands, climbing towards the sun. My mother was right that day to be wary of the water. How it lured me by lapping my ankles playfully, convincing me to escape the incessant heat of summer, offering relief away from the crowded concrete yard. But what a way to learn that drowning when you don't know how to swim is just as terrifying whether you are in an American swimming pool or the Philippine Sea. It's as if the water claimed her motherhood, engulfing me in her womb. This body is no longer mine, but belongs to someone else forgotten in my family line who spent their last moments desperately fighting the dark. Desperation clawing my throat, swelling in the residual spaces of my lungs, heart threatening to jump ship along with whatever air I have left. And God, the drowning has less to do with foreign water invading and more of remembering what it means to be alone in the first place. I wonder if Mother Mary is watching me now, struggling to form a prayer underwater. But how can you pray in a language you don't remember? How can you reach for help when the sun doesn't recognize your skin, pale and blue and cool after surrendering to the cold? It's sink or swim, Papa likes to say, whenever I ask why he left the drowning house in Malabon. Back home, there's no chance of swimming. But here, I can't tell the difference between home and hurting, drowning, breathing. If I am the islands and the islands are me, then all I know is how to be alone. To be an islander is to be the islands, is to be familiar with how our bodies are made to be sacrificed to the ocean, taken by the tide, spat out by the current, flung to the far corners of the world. But just like the islands, rising right before the ocean declares victory, I don't know how to drown gracefully. Never swim alone, my mother has always said. We are ubiquitous, children of the sun and the sea, displaced but one entity. You are still my people. Hindi tayo nag-iisa. I dared to open my eyes. The chlorine burns, but it's not as dissimilar to salt. It takes everything in me to reach for the surface. It's as if I was in Parañaque again, desperately crawling the statue, seeking salvation for the distant halo of sun. I didn't think you'd recognize me, said the water. I thought I come from a long line of survivors, I want to reply, but I don't waste any breath even as it threatens to escape. I've taken some of yours before, the water added, darkness cocooning. You can join them. You might have, I think to myself, kicking, flailing, launching myself from the slimy bottom of the pool. But I am them. I am everyone you have taken. My body for my people. Hindi ako nag-iisa. 1,000 hands broke from the surface, lifting me from the watery below. And there I am, clumsy and gasping and resurrected, relearning the taste of the sweet tang of summer air, ready to inhale the sky. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was so blessed. And what a kinship it is to have two Filipinx, non-binary trans people sharing this space. Thank you, JT, for facilitating this coordination, and thank you all for being here. So I'm just gonna kick it off. Ano ba? My name is Kay Ulanday Barrett. Can everybody hear me all right? Give me a little thumbs up or a little thumbs up in the chats. Please utilize the chat if you don't want your face to be seen, kasi mystery. I get it. My name is Kay Ulanday Barrett, and my pronouns are they, he, and siya, which is the decolonial term, pre-Japan, pre-US, pre-China, all of that, meaning them, generally speaking. And I'm currently located in the unceded and occupied land of the Lenape and Munsee peoples in New York, New Jersey. I am an award-winning poet, essayist, and cultural strategist. For your accessibility needs, to do an active description, I am a brown, round queer with glasses, and I have a purple hat on. I have a gray collared shirt, and behind me is a white background. I have COVID hair these days, so thank you for your patience. That's why the hat. Hello to lovely familiar people. I see Catherine out there. I see Moises. I see Ramona. Hello, Chicago. I miss you all. So I'm so thrilled to be a part of this conference, Beyond Binary Genders in the Past, Present, and Future, because it directly connects to how I envision redistribution of communities in struggle, how we archive, how we embody trans, how we do non-binary, and actually how we realize any gendered spirit that isn't in the confines of English or even westernized academic institutions. No? As someone who was raised in the 90s hip-hop, through Filipino organizers, mostly women, I want to start off with a little call and response. And I really want to charge this call and response for people of the global majority. So I'm asking white people to move back. And so Black, Indigenous, people of color, please show up either in the chats or in the video, whatever you need. And Isang Bagsak, many of you might not know, is a chant. And it translates to one hit, to one witness. It's done with a collective or a community when y'all are in meetings, when we're at protests, when we make decisions together. And I'm just asking people, BIPOC specifically, to think of someone who needs just a little extra care and tenderness. It's COVID, still COVID, but we're in this empire, right? So call some tenderness. It could be for an ancestor. It could be for a friend. It could even be for yourself. So if we could just take a deep breath and dedicate this time to this person. When I say Isang Bagsak, people please stomp, clap, scream, emoji, whatever you need to do that in the chats or just within you. Cool? So let's take these people and have a big inhale. Holding them. Exhale. Conferences are long and this life is short. Inhale. Exhale. When I say Isang Bagsak, you stomp, clap, or scream, or emoji as you like. Ready? Isang Bagsak! Isang Bagsak! Isang Bagsak! This poem is from my trans and non-binary aunties, my titas, who have trouble finding homes in their own families or in this country. How brilliant we have become to create our chosen family in this empire. Aunties love it when the seafood is on sale. Argyle, Red Line, Chicago, Illinois, June 1996, after Giselle Buchanan. In the summertime, the women in my family spin sago like planets. making even Saturn blush. They split the leaves of kangkong with riverbed softness. Yo, they are precise. Measure rice by palm lines with laughter and seasoned broth made from creatures' last gasps. You'd swear that they were teenagers again. Talking chismis and gossip, stretching limbs, elastic, durable, like seaweed. Come dinner time, huh? Skilled mouths slurp through the domes of shrimp and crab. Sorry, this is not a vegan poem. My apologies. My titas, they prize the fat. The angles of their teeth splinter claw, snap sinew, dip tart into sweet, then back again. Bitterness, balanced. Succulence, all succulence is to find flesh from even the smallest of spaces. Women who swallow whole, who make a pile of bones, who suck teeth and taste every morsel until all that is left is a quiet room and shelves of what once was. To the daughters of dried fishnets, whose dreams dragged on this sand dragged, to this country they bring home recipe years later, flick joint to garlic, salabat to the sick, culinary remix, teach my cousins, hoy, this is how you stay alive in this cold, white country. All of them mourning in the Midwest by taste bud. And afterwards, my aunties, see, they keep the ocean husks for another meal because to get a good deal is to double. And anybody from an island will tell you that is where the true flavor is. Now, what is hunger anyway? But the carving out of emptiness, the learning to always save something for later. Thank you so much. Hey, Catherine. Hey, Destiny. Hey, everybody. Kain na tayo. Food. All right. So currently, when I'm thinking about the connections of justice making, right, I think it's not just the moments that are illustrated in the news or in fast tweet flurries. I think what Sylvia Rivera calls on and has taught Black, Indigenous, and POC trans and non-binary people. I think of this quote. I literally, any residency I go to, any trip pre-COVID, I would have this quote just bombast looking at me. And the quote is, we have to be visible. We should not be ashamed of who we are. We have to show the world that we are numerous. There are many of us out there. So this is a love poem. How many people in the crowd identify as brown, Black, Indigenous, POC, mixed, Hapa, whatever that means? How many people, no? And how many of you all identify as being queer and trans and non-binary? You're beige. I got you. Hello, East Asian. Totally. Hold that light skin privilege, complexity. So this next poem, yes. This next poem is called Brownout Shouts. I'm in New Jersey, so we've just survived some of the backlash of Ida. Some of the streets still don't have gas or electricity. So Brownout Shouts, I'm sending my love to especially queer, trans, non-binary Black folks who are facing the impacts of Ida and the impacts of, I want to say, ableist and racist, climate impacts, right? Climate terrorism. So this poem is just for my dearests. This is for Matea, who dances the bomba with hands that caress moon hips and who admittedly kisses harder than she loves herself. Every trans, queer, genderqueer, fairy, futchy, stud, AG, butch queen, anything with roots arch toward her. Their arms are like petals soaking up their light. And this is for my student, hard-ass Chris, who doesn't want anything to do with Brasso or that JROTC uniform, but just wants 3 meals a day for their brother and a brand new binder for his chest. This poem is for Javi, who takes their tequila quick. For Aqua Star Black, because they had the bravery, had the bravery to rename themselves, nah? Aqua Star Black. And sometimes you just gotta call out your own power because no one else is gonna do it for you. Maria is a dancer clasping onto hardwood by the heels, but serves our coffee at the diner, always with a smile and always with her hair on point. And she's pissed off because her partner can't afford to go to the hospital. And although you can't see it, her heart breaks because there are no papers or government that can explain how this sick person in a bed makes her laugh like a guttural fool. This is for JP, who draws sketches, sneaking them into your purse, satchel, or wallet. This is for my comrade and Familia Saliani, whose caliber demands that the very least of her lovers, play partners, or metamors have the following traits: a dexterity, initiative, and someone who can lay it down. Okay, so this is a trans non-binary conference, and that was just a fisting reference. So sometimes I have to do some cultural sharing and sharing that reference. So I hope that you all caught our interlingual conversation. For every sun shaped in bullets, your heart is compact as a trigger. Your voice is sharp as a wind song that wants to lay a forehead down on the chest of your boyfriend. Let your letters survive the wars. The jail cells. Let the meter of your words swoon your lover back to the bed. As you take turns turning off the alarm on that nightstand with your toes, elbows, orgasms, and in-between kisses for that one lonely Korean guy, Jake, who found me in a group of 500 white people of the Sugar Club in Dublin, Ireland. I make do, he said. We've got one grocery store and I practically live there. I mean, my kimchi is decent. It's not like my hummus, you know? And we can still see him shrugging in the strobe lights, hungry for somewhere else. This poem is for you this afternoon. Spring cleaning your blues away. And maybe you're in your favorite t-shirt. Maybe you called in sick. Maybe your body rattles because you're missing your familia back home. Maybe you're waiting for that next hormone shot to find home in yourself. Maybe you've just lost a loved one in this pandemic and you're about to lose yourself. Lost in the whimsy of musical notes, the rhythms can consume sadness if you let it. This is for my dearest Sarwat, who sat on a hill, held up the sun, was at a conference much like this, and looked at all the fine trans and non-binary queers of color, and said without saying, hey, little sibling, I'm not gonna go to that plenary workshop or speech. You go on ahead. I'm gonna stay right here. People look too good. I deserve this. For Espanol, Pangasinan, Patois, Pidgin, Mandarin love poems you write for those baby queers and trans youth who sprout out from neighborhoods described to white tourists as, don't go there. It's dangerous. Rolling up their windows from our existence. For you who fights for our rights, for you who laughs too loud, for you who eats too much, for you who twists wrists by paintbrush, for you who will not let yourself or your spirit pass up a sunset or a protest, even when you think you deserve less sometimes. For you. That's it. There's a brownout right now. And by that, I mean there is no electricity, which means life is crashing and pouring down. And by that, I mean, I am lonely, which really means that we are brown and trans and queer and out. And we've been told too many times that all of those cannot belong at once. That based on those odds, we equal death. For you, for us, for we, because without explanation we exist. And you, like all of your ancestors before, you live it so fiercely that even when injustice sets in, this rumbling sky houses your breath. And that is bigger than any survival story. That is joy being born. Thank you so much. So I think when we're talking about trans and queer non-binary futurity, rarity, how many people here identify as spoony or sick and disabled or people in chronic pain? Thank you, Veronica. That's so kind of you. This poem, you know how we're like T for T, trans for trans, femme for femme. So there's this conversation that I had, and I realized sometimes that I'm sick for sick. I want to be with sick people. I want to celebrate in our disabled bodies. I think there's a stigma, even in trans perception, for what is the perfect trans body? It's usually always abled. Somebody like many of us who are talkers, who are very verbal, a lot of like thin inspiration, skinny, muscled, and that's just not my life, right? And I still, without the ideas of empire and ableism, find that bountiful, like find that so sexy. So here's sick for sick. And also to make note, this poem is about being in love, but it doesn't have to be romantic, it could be deeper and kindred. And this with being in love with another sick, disabled, non-binary person of color. Their bodies patched, swollen skin, hair flecks gone rogue, mismatched knees, ache knits quilt throughout, curvature. Curvature is a soft thing. They said, if we hum close enough that our chests touch, shared breath comes from belly up, that is not platonic. Now breathe same air. Nostril kinetic by way of brow cleft pirouette of migraine syllables, twirl temples, strain is something to lull here together. When nerves are ablaze, I'm told to be blanket. Lay my torso on theirs, abdomen to abdomen, core to core. Is this what a field does to a hill? Spill it with poppies. Let me tell you, I wait on their skill. How they will sigh. The human body is heating pad, limbs bonfire, flip sheets. You cannot reverse sick. And today, beloved, we don't want to. Chest's pulse, softest lake. Come spring. Come spring, we never do this again. It's only the memory of it. How their lungs cathedral. How I prayed there on the ledge of inhale, sternum sacred, coughed him, spasm luminescence. Syllable stretched, muscled sacraments, more than splay, us, petals in overlap, us in ampersand, on fire. Thank you so much. Yes, raised Catholic. So I like to insert somebody in the chat said, were you raised Catholic? Absolutely. So I love to flip and trip worship in all the ways that we're queer. You know what I'm saying? I feel like trans and queer glory, the way we create God, Godex, if you don't believe in that, universe, land, right, is a sacred kinful thing. So this next poem is content warning, mention of suicide and trans violence. And it's called When I'm Trying Not to Jump for My Brothers. So it's giving you that preface. And if there are ways you need to take care of yourself, have some tea, a little merienda, some snacking. Please do if you need to take a beat. One, this is a new poem, so let's see how this goes. One, because Caden called 911, because my family Kaite couldn't cry anymore, and because there are boys, BOI, with chests that house hearts for a world that can't stand their grasp. When leisure walk means to be harassed, dragged by hair, kicked in stalls, torso clash, discarded to tile, dudes sneer, faggots, when I'm not faggot enough. Whole men strike stares on subway. Whole men tell me tales of their penises like correction is only punctuation. One night, 1 minute, that's all it'll take. Next poof, I'll be a darling wife. My set of teeth, a bland picket fence. 2. The first time I wore a men's suit was as drag. My mother kept crying, why did we even come to this country? As though I was the war, as though I was that bomb backdrop. Oh, in her dreams, that first time I cut my hair short, follicles to the floor. Ang nanay ko crowed, where's my girl? Where's my child? Picture me on my knees, pleading to prove that I wasn't a ghost. 3. There are no gay children in the heart of mothers like mine. Just mistakes. Killable kin. My people don't make headlines. You know what it is to get a Facebook message, Twitter, Instagram, post, text message with the face of the dead friend, pupil, glare, grief, but you laughed with them just weeks earlier, months earlier. How? I saw them. I saw them at the protest or the fundraiser. 4. I was about 18 when my friend A flung themselves off a cliff. Brown boys, we don't turn into men without fighting men on stoops, blood varnished at house parties by men cousins, by men uncles. A teenager thought better to face flat rocks on California bluff could be more solace than the frowns of blood family. 5. A bluff is a double entendre for precipice, as in calling your, considered sometimes as a scam, a sham. A bluff, also known as out loud, also known as forthright. See, also bordering a river, a coastal crest. My gender so brazen, our gender so brazen, we must be silenced, surrendered. Tell me, can you hear us? Can you hear us all? Trying not to shatter into the ground. Thank you. Yeah, teeth as a picket fence. Isn't that frightening? I was just thinking about white, and I said, what else supports a white nuclear family? And that's how that image came. Let's see. So I'm going to do a last poem. It's my last poem, so I might go a bit over. It's oldie but a goodie, and it's called Right to Release. There's this trans non-binary occupation with our genitals, right? Everybody is like, how do you do it? Where do you go? You can't go to the bathroom. So I was like, fine, I'll write that poem. And yes, I want to thank you all for listening and being here. And I'm so excited for the Q&A. Right to Release. For the longest time, I dreaded bathrooms. The bleach singeing my nostrils. I pictured my brown mama in every white person's house scrubbing tile, making what other people took for granted shine. In airports, I clench my bladder. In public, anywhere, I can hold it until a third floor walk-up can turn bloody. See, there's this story almost every trans non-binary person mouths when they just have to pee. And it's not in the bladder, but it's guttural. It goes something like this. I am real. I am real. I am real shit. I really have to go to the bathroom. And if what they say is true, that bathrooms are where we are all our most human, then I'm a dilapidated National Geographic, barely mammal, told to leave even in the dirtiest of places example. Brown girl lowers her register like it's of cobwebs and steel, slouches in a baggy shirt, goes beeline for that stall, doesn't want to wash their hands for fear to scrape off stairs and screams in daydreams the next day and the next until their girlfriend's hands become pillows, because even in your dreams, people can still name your pronouns and be wrong. Next, they are told that as a boy that they are in the wrong place. So to drink a cup of water is a hazard in waiting. And honestly, I wish I could just shit on every curse every time some trans woman or femme turns threat, when she or they just want a mirror to see themselves in full length glory once a month. Nah, I want it to be Shark Week. I want to announce Shark Week and build a structure of blood that would make Rapunzel shiver. And it would take crimson to write, because all poets and artists who just love the word crimson. I am real. I am real. I am real. You don't have to punch it out of me. A bruised eye like a swollen gourd, a kicked rib, the density of a smashed plum. Do you know how long it takes for some trans or non-binary people like me to accept a hug? Oh, here's my blood now. It's sacrilegious, sends the repellent stares, for hormones or not. I am no waste of time dumping ground to let you, in your terrors, haunt you in a whisper. Shh. Guess what? Spoiler alert, you aren't normal. You aren't real either. That locker room hush, that road trip bus stop stank, that fast food restaurant stain on your shirt, forgive me. We know how this ends, but do we? Is it so wrong to just want to clench your jaw in the light, praise any shape of your chest in the fluorescence, catalog and alter from my hips to the new hair on the alone on the throne in leisure, and not be headline, not gravestone, not hashtag, not missing, not ideation, and most certainly not become ash. And though I am never clean, I'm never gonna be. Your colonization that forced my family here made sure of that. But what I do know is this: a brown woman, migrant, and their child cannot grow up in your shit. Can I just feel the water and the tap on my knuckles like baptism? Because we as humans are 60% water, and though I'm never clean, let me tell you, the tide of the ocean beats inside me, inside my people. Look, have you ever tried to stop a rainstorm, or have you ever tried to contain a wave, or, date a Pisces or a water sign? So many feelings. You know what? No matter what, nothing can take away their right to release. Thank you so much, UIC. Thank you so much, friends. Thank you, Michael. Yes, I came for a Pisces, and I love you all. Let's have a Q&A now for the next few minutes.
Wow. Thank you so much, Kay and Michael. I'll just speak, for myself, coming off a long day of conference. Like, that was beautiful. I just appreciate you both, your work, your words. It was just really, we grounded this morning with some community members, and I feel like I'm regrounding with you all in a way, and it was just beautiful. Thank you so much. All right. I see a lot happening in the chat. A lot of applause, a lot of thank yous. And, I want to remind folks, if you do have questions, there's a Q&A function. There's like a chat there. Go ahead and drop those questions in that chat. We do have one question. Give me 1 second in the chat. Someone messaged me privately. So the question is, this is for both of you. So this is for Michael and Kay. Why poetry rather than other genres as a way of communicating personal and political commitments? What is it about poetry that works for you?
That is such a good question. Kay, do you want to go first, or should I?
It's really up to you. I can go now. I grew up very working class and low income. So I think what's really important for me is when I was younger, poetry was the most accessible to me. And people who are familiar with Chicago and also who know my work here, you know, yes, slam poetry was started in Chicago, but so much organizing that happened through various Filipino organizing, Gabriela Network, things like that, started with poetry. If you study Filipinx history and you understand political theater, poetry has always been a part of that. My mom was an organizer as a domestic worker, and we would do journaling and free writing and poetry at those spaces. Poetry, essentially, outside of white supremacist American English-speaking academia, is actually very much storytelling, is connected and interspersed with theater, with cultural work, with social work, facilitation, with movement. And so poetry was just that natural go-to. If I could have a pen and paper, or for my students who are houseless and homeless, if they have a cell phone or pen and paper, they can start there. I don't have to buy an expensive canvas. I don't have to download any expensive tools or paints or sculpture or any of those things. Essentially, poetry can start from where you are. So because I want to meet my community where I'm at, that's why I think poetry is really important. Now, when it gets all white and messy, it's separate. White cis messiness, that's its own separate elitism. But where I believe poetry comes from people and is for the people. And so I don't have very many skills. It's like the one skill that I'm like so at now. So I was like, let's go with it. I could not be the lawyer or the doctor my family needed. So here I am at UIC with you all.
Poet it is, poet it is. I know that for me personally, I have literally run to every single avenue of writing and of artistry that I possibly could get my hands on. Ever since I was younger, I was the 5-year-old that would try to make like little like story flip books out of like cardboard paper. And then that evolved into me attempting to make these lengthy novels that maybe someday you'll see, but also some of them are like not worth reading or touching. But I always fell back to poetry for very much of the same reason that Kay said, in which it is the most accessible and the easiest. And I always found that when I write, it is to host an honest dialogue with myself that otherwise would not have happened if I did not write. And poetry was just the most fluid way to express myself because it could also be easily transitioned into song or into movement or even like in collaboration with other more academic or rigid forms of writing. So I think I don't always lean on poetry, and I'm not confident enough to say that poetry is going to be my home as a medium, but it's definitely something that, because of its fluidity, it's given me a voice.
I love what both of you are saying, right? In terms of accessibility, in terms of applying your voice. I guess kind of a follow-up question I have, I'm just going to jump in here because, I have so many questions, is like when you're writing, kind of what is your process, but also do you feel like you're almost like writing yourself into existence, or is it like you're writing more about what's happening? Like how does that play into your process? And then as a third point, real quick, I'll just sneak this last one in there. What role does vulnerability play in your work? And how do you manage, like I have vulnerability hangovers sometimes when I write and when I share. Like right now, right, you're in front of folks, like we're on screen, people's cameras are off. This is kind of odd times we're living in. How do you manage the feeling of vulnerability in your work?
Shigina, Michael, you go now.
Okay. I believe the first part of the question was like, what is the thought process, I believe, or like, what is the process of like how poems start? All right. It's never the same. And I think that's something I find freedom in, is that creativity doesn't always have to have the same baseline. I mean, there's also some like, sometimes we get something out of structure, but most of the times I am waking up at midnight spontaneously because there's this line in my head that won't get out of my head until I pull out my phone and I record me talking for like 5 minutes. Sometimes it's me frantically like walking on my way to my commute and then typing stuff in my notebook. I also have like way too many journals And beyond those journals, way too many pieces of paper and receipts and postcards with like little lines scribbled on them. So for me, it's more of a discombobulation of like, I don't spend a lot of time just sitting and being like, okay, what do I need to write now? It just comes out of me because there's so much within me that can't be contained, which is both a good and a bad thing, especially because I think sometimes I'm afraid of being engulfed by it, which leads into the vulnerability aspect of unless I believe, I mean, when it comes to the value of my work, I'm also trying to learn not to put a value on it that's quantifiable because it's kind of capitalistic. But when it comes to what I find that I most treasure about what I put out is I ask myself when I look at a piece of writing, is it honest? Is it honest? Is it honest? And the vulnerability doesn't have to be forced when it's honest, because I don't even think about having a conversation with the audience. I think about having the conversation with myself and the fusion of selves that I am. But in balancing vulnerability and taking care of myself after, I make sure to tell myself that it's okay to take breaks from writing, especially as an academic, especially as someone that that doesn't do this full time. Yeah, just taking breaks, getting a cup of tea, being with my family, being with myself after all of it. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to remember that there's a lineage of writing. There's an intergenerational connection. I think oftentimes we don't value not just transgender, non-binary, and queer people, but we don't value culture and artists who are trans and non-binary, and that there's this injustice to if we name trans liberation and collective care, we know it's just not about equity or a paper or like, you know, an event, but there's been so many who have led trans and non-binary legacy and liberatory struggle. So for me, I'm always thinking, okay, what would Polly Murray, you know, who was a writer and a lawyer who wrote political speeches and legal policy, what about Sylvia Rivera, right? Because it's bigger than me. It's bigger than this moment or this Zoom room, who drew cultural work and performance for all of those speeches, or Marsha P. Johnson, who is a performer and poet. Like, we have to remember that for me in that process, whenever I'm writing, I know that art rallied the crowd. Is what kept people. It was like art and food, right? Like you get promised you're at pizza at a university, and then somebody says something really, really interesting and intriguing. And so in my own cultures, my decisions with poetry, being Filipinx meant being a Filipinx in the diaspora, right? And what that means. Trans men and trans people back home use political theater as protest all the time, use poems to get housing needs met, to push back on dictatorship fueled by the US Philippine, you know, regime. And culture changing for me has to start with like, the questions I ask my students are like, who are you writing for? Who is your audience? What do your ancestors think of your work? And is there illumination in it? Is there something that reimagines? Anybody can say the water is wet, racism sucks, right? I think it's a poet's opportunity that embodies people who came before me, and also my community and chosen family I'm with. And I think with that vulnerability, I believe in collective care. So after every event, this is UIC is the first university I'm at for the start of my tour. I'm going to 15 other events. If it were not virtual, I'd be going to about 9 other cities. And so in that aftercare, so much about my book, More Than Organs, is like, have a circle to check in with, to text, to help you with scripts for self-advocacy. Water. What are your comfort things? So do you pray? Do you have crystals if you're woo? Do you like to walk outside? Do you like to Netflix that shit out? You know, to really have this itemized, almost Virgo list in your toolkit. Because aftercare isn't just like a self-care mechanism. It's a tool for social justice, for collective, so that we all can be responsible for each other. When I write for people, they're responsible by me and I'm responsible by them. And there's no separation.
Whew. We should have just sprinkled y'all throughout the day. And Kay, you coming for all of our zodiacs. Virgo here. I got my list here. I'll take that. So I'm going to just ask both of these questions and you all can answer as you see fit. First question is from Catherine. Are you really intentional about the rhythms in your poetry, or does it just happen as a byproduct of words that come to you? Ooh. And then we have another question from Erica. What roles does community connection and accountability play in your ability to speak to some of the topics you write about?
Wow.
So if I may I, Michael, so I don't forget? It's like as soon as I hear the question, I'm like,
go ahead.
Basta. Okay, Catherine's question about musicality. You're a musician, I'm sure. So, as being a poet, whether you're in formal structures, you're in spoken word, you're in theater, you're publishing, musicality and cadence are intrinsic to what you do. I think that's what's so beautiful about poetry is we're trying to find the music of pronunciation and of sound. For me, sonically, when I speak with my students, all these literary hubbity-bub people who are like, hey, write poetry. But these fuckers, they don't even read their poems out loud. Like, I come from a culture where everything is storytelling and chismes. Everything is gossip. What my tita told my mom, told my grandma. I know what my cousin is doing eons before it fucking even hits internet. That crazy rich Asian stuff isn't a lie. They just have more money to do so, right? I mean, if you come from migrant community or small working class community, for me, you know your own internal rhythm. It's also like a song. If you know a Whitney Houston song, you know a Whitney Houston song. You know her, you know how she moves, how her riffs, and poets are very similar. Dancers are very similar. We all have this signature, this essence, right? And I think the musicality that uncovers that is so necessary. If you're, I say with poetry, with a lot of people, if you're just hitting one note, right? It's not going to work. It's like visually too. If I'm just showing you one color the whole time, it's like there's no stimuli. You want to create these level of depth and nuance. In theater, it's like levels, right? And I think with the second question, community and community accountability, it's hard because I started out as a community organizer. I didn't start out from a conventional poetry literary sphere. I also didn't start out just in the not-for-profit industrial complex. So for me, I always have a circle of people, younger people, older people, multi-generation, people in theater, people who are organizers, people who are doing, strategic accountability praxis, like so many people where I'm like, what do you think of this poem? How does this land? And the ability to be vulnerable and messy, right? And for me to be like, oh, that's not working. Or what do I have to unpack with that? What bullshit did I just say right here? Like, can I have a friend or friends or a writing community that's like, oh, let's bring it back, friend. Let's be more humble. Or, oh, you're actually not touching what I think you want to engage. Like, what are you hiding? So I think it's important in that vulnerability to have chosen family. For me, I have SCOONY, sick and disabled, queer, trans, Black, Indigenous people of color to really hold me fast and hold me slow and to really be like, where's your work going? What do your ancestors say? And most importantly, like, it's not a transactional process, but what are you doing to contribute to the larger universe and canon, right? I think when I hold that down, we're all just trying to do the best we freaking can, right? So if we have each other, collective care, we're able to create in ways that just can't be touched.
Yeah, definitely. If someone could repeat the questions to me because they went in one ear and out the other,
sure.
I think that would be amazing.
For sure. I was actually just looking to refresh myself because I was like, that was such an amazing, I was wrapped up in Kay's answer. So Catherine asked, are you really intentional about the rhythms in your poetry, or does it just happen as a byproduct of words that come to you? So that's the first question. And then Erica asked, what roles does community connection and accountability play in your ability to speak to some of the topics you write about?
All right, thank you. So the first question in terms of being intentional about rhythm, I just remember I was in 3rd grade and I had to recite this poem for some sort of audition or whatever, and it was very yada da 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 yada da da da. I knew nothing, or I really didn't see outside. Okay, I need to go clap 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 clap. But in terms of finding more of a fluidity, it's the same thing as catching a wave, so to speak, in which the ocean has its own turns and the tide shifts, but there's some sort of constant that comes with that. Or whenever I think of energy or people, or even when it comes to my writing, it's about finding the heartbeat in it. Like, where does the energy settle? Where does the energy push and pull? And when it comes to finding the rhythm, which is something that I'm still very much learning, my my speech teacher in high school, senior year, different teacher than what I talked about, told me that if I just took a deep breath and I was able to speak that sentence in one breath and not try to hold any air and to just let it flow as naturally as possible, then that would create the rhythm itself. So sometimes that would look like me taking a breath and then pausing at a comma or whenever other punctuation came up, or if it was a longer sentence, letting it flow and letting the air guide it itself. Yeah. So when it really came down, it to rhythm, it's not something that's necessarily like structural or industrial, but something that just comes from yourself, as cliche as that sounds, with a little bit of practice, of course. Now, when it comes to community and accountability, this is personally such a hard question for me and something that I'm reckoning with, because I've been spending, or I guess all of us have been spending this year in isolation, right? Especially with COVID and then other things going on. And then, as some of you may or may not know, I also took a gap semester for some health reasons. So I felt very removed from my community, and I'm also assessing who is my community and who I want to be in my community, and who and just assessing, not because people are necessarily good or bad, but just like, who do I want in my space and who do I value in my space. So because I'm going through this transition of figuring out what is safe and what is brave and what I want to hold, the same people that I would consider my community are not necessarily part of my community anymore, which isn't good or bad. It's just transitional. But in these periods when I'm like, okay, questioning who is my community, I always lean on my ancestors, which is something Kay has repeated, and is something that I will hold on to for the rest of my life. Is I always think, okay, what would my ancestors think of this? What would my ancestors think of this? And when nothing else can be the guiding star, they are that for me.
We don't have, let me check, we just got one in the chat. Thank you both. I want to kind of wrap this up with the final question. And if you all have any final reflections or anything you would like to share, again, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. This was really actually quite healing, for me. And I really appreciate you all. So the first panel of the day asked a question, and I would like to ask you all the same question. And that question is, how does your gender embodiment pave the way or create opportunities for future genders? Right? We're at this conference and we're talking about gender embodiment, and I would just love to get both of your thoughts on that. I know it's a kind of big question, but if you have any reflections. So what does gender look like in the future? And how do you feel your gender embodiment paves the way or creates opportunities for future genders?
Beautiful question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, take it on.
Oh, I was just going to say, for me, I think one thing that I really, really needed today was to see an elder and to be on this panel with Kay, because especially throughout this last week of reflection and contemplation from a lot of things that have happened in my personal life, I have an extremely hard time seeing myself in the future. Seeing myself as 30 years old, as 40 years old, seeing myself as 80 and living proudly as this genderqueer self, just because we've lost a lot of elders. And when I say we, I don't just mean within the queer, the trans sense, I also mean as like a Filipino and as a Filipino American. It's so hard to see us in the future. So like this has already given me so much hope. And in terms of like how it's also like incredibly humbling to me to imagine how I am also paving the way for others. I know that within my family, I am the only out non-binary person, only out queer person. But I know that for my cousins, I do have queer cousins that came out to me and were like, "Hey, I really trust you as a safe person." But it's also recognizing that the future exists beyond myself and my generation, and that the future is this legacy that I still have such a hard time imagining. But I don't have to imagine it because it's real and it exists and it's potent and it's alive. So I just wanted to say that.
I mean, it's a tricky question, really, because I feel like when we're discussing possibility models and like gender futures and gendered imaginations, again, I feel like what's really important is to draw on just an imagination that isn't carceral, that doesn't like live in that binary. And I know for all the times I was force fed what gender was in a white American context or in an abled context, I knew that there were just lineages, stories, and experts, people with deep savvy who just weren't given, not even given, just didn't have the platforms because they were stolen from them, right? Like we're on indigenous land. People were forced migrated here or enslaved here. So we know that on purpose, the white supremacy project has stolen trans voices, has stolen trans lives, and inflicted and continues to inflict such degradation and violence to our land and to our communities. And so for me, I just know I'm a conduit, one of millions, right? And when I was little, I remember being in like rural Michigan, where I grew up before Chicago, and going to the library. We didn't have computerized systems, friends. We had those little pull-out drawers. See, JT kind of knows what that means. You know, you're pulling out the drawer and you look at the cards. And so I'm like less than 3 feet looking at the cards. And then later, even in college, I would look it up. I'd be like, Filipino transgender, poet, nothing. Or just like sex worker shaming or violence or military. And I was just like, dang, I want to be able, and not to say technology is the harness of all, but when we think about archives, like I want somebody to Google and not just see my name, but to know that there isn't a slice of pie, that we are living in abundance, that this world has been ours. You know, like if we're talking about Black trans folks, we have Lady Dana Didi, J Mason III. We have so many people, Filipinx and trans people, disabled trans people. Like it's there, it's been there. If somebody doesn't know, not in this argument of Filipinx, there's this whole conversation that I had to write a ridiculous university paper for like Asian literary because people don't listen to just regular ass people. They need it to be an ethnographic study, even though nobody knows what ethnographic means. I had to be like, well, you know, Filipinx has always been, and it may not have been that term. Is it that you don't like the letter X in Latinx or X in Filipinx? Or is it just you don't like queer people? Bah? Is it just you don't like trans people? Is it that you just want to erase us? Right? And so for me, I was like, we've been here. This isn't new. Conferences like us, we hang out and skill share, community build every day, to go to the SSDI office, to get our pronouns changed, to get food stamps, to fight off the cops, to get medical care, to, you know, have safer practices with our partners. All of these things, we've been doing it. It's not new. So for me, my imagination is actually like, yes, there are these cosmic embodiments. I'm like, wow, what we have here is so good. It's so good. Like, just hold it. Like, the good that's here, that's not carceral, that doesn't come from white supremacy, that's not ours. That's just straight shit. That's not ours. You know? That's not my language, right? So for me, it's like, wow, what have we developed that has been always radiant, that just needs to be unearthed, that is beyond me, beyond you, you know, like. And for young people who are growing up trans and non-binary and whatever words we're going to use, 3 years, JT, you are an academic, you know, in 3 or 4 years, that's just going to turn around and there are going to be new flyers and things we have to tell people, because we, trans and queer, BIPOC especially, reinvent language so beautifully, right? Like, that's our magic. I think that's the future, is that tension of like what is now has always been, but also in the future, it's going to be stuff we could never imagine. Like, I couldn't imagine TikTok when I was 4. What the hell? You know? What is that? And now here we are, invigorating our whole selves. Like, what a time. What a time.
What a time indeed. Thank you all for your time, your energy, your brilliance, your personhood. We just are so grateful for you. Thank you. Let's just flood the chat. If you're here with us, flood the chat. Thank yous. Share some love, hearts, everything, all that. We are finally at the kind of end of day 1 of this conference. I couldn't have imagined us going out on a higher note. So thank you all so much. Kay, Michael, before I kind of wrap up, did you all have any final thoughts or any announcements you wanted to make or anything like that?
I have a book. It's cute. It has 2 stickers.
There you go.
I don't know. It's cute.
I love it.
Has no sky.
Look at y'all. Both got y'all books. That's a picture. We need to get a picture of that. This
is how I make print. Nah? So if you're interested, she's dancing. That's what they do. And if you have any questions, please, Brown Round Boy, BOI, on all my social media. Hey, look at their cousin. Look at that cousin. Hey. Yes.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Check out the social media platforms. Definitely get those books. You will not regret it. And just for folks who are still here, please check us out tomorrow. It's going to be a really, really great day tomorrow. We have a session, a roundtable on research, activism, and community. We have some great folks who are going to be a part of that discussion, really connecting a lot of the things we've been talking about, what Kay and Michael have been talking about, and just kind of bringing us home, right? Like, how do we do this work in community, with community? How do we bridge, the academy with what, what's happening in the lives of, non-binary or gender expansive folks, right? Then we have a Dapper who's going to be doing an exploration of queer Black joy in Chicago through house music. It's going to be really fun. Get your dance on, learn a little something. And then we're actually going to have a virtual coffee time, which is just an opportunity for folks who are interested to come together and kind of reflect on the conference. This is a lot of information. This is a one-of-a-kind of experience for us who are in, the academy. This is not an everyday pack, debrief, connect. If you maybe heard from someone and you're like, wow, I'm really resonating with you, it's just an opportunity to come together, maybe exchange contact information, since we're not all able to be on camera during the conference. So join us tomorrow. Thank you, Kay and Michael. Mark, Nick, do you have any final words?
Only thank you so much for those inspiring performances. What an incredible way to end the day. And I just loved what both of you were saying about poetry. I am a poetry person myself, and hearing you talk about the power of that genre, it was just really, really fantastic. So thank you for generously sharing your time with us. And for everyone else, thank you for sharing your time with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.